Hello everyone! Before we begin, I would just like to warn you that this is a very early draft of this story, and thus it has not been edited beyond what I have done to make it readable and enjoyable to read, and to fix some of the most problematic parts, but otherwise it is unchanged from the way I originally wrote it. That being said, there are going to be some parts of storytelling that are going to be a little rough, but I still think this is I still think it's a very good story, and I'm excited to share it with you guys. Let us begin. Chapter 1. Adyen. Sometimes I wondered how we got here, creeping through a window into the Painted Wolf's headquarters in the dead of night, hoping we wouldn't get caught. It's because we have no other choice. We had to retrieve the Jewel of Ankred for the Dark Hearts. The promise I had made with their leader had to remain in place. I couldn't lose my sister, no matter what questionable lengths I had to go to. I heaved myself onto the windowsill, exhaling slowly so I wouldn't grunt as I got a grip on the inside. I perched on the edge momentarily, peering into the dark room beyond. No sound. No sign of movement. I carefully lowered myself into the room and turned back to wave Aster in. My twin sister climbed through with a light bound, clearing the sill with a grace and silence only she could have. Despite the long, patterned skirt she wore, it barely rustled when she moved. She wore her dark curly hair, like mine, only a little longer, tied back with string to keep it out of the way. Sometimes she wore a colorful scarf on top of it, but not tonight. Tonight, stealth was key. Her bright eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail she could pick out of the dimness. I let my eyes rove over darkened shapes of doors sitting flush with the wall. The floor was bare, except for some cloth mats lying askew on the floorboards. Aster concluded her own scan and nodded across the room, where a door led into the rest of the low, unassuming building. It housed the Painted Wolves, a ruthless gang known for their brutality. Why they had a relic like the Jewel of Ankred was beyond me. We crossed the room, stepping lightly so we wouldn't activate any creaking boards. I didn't know if the Painted Wolves were light sleepers or not, but it would be foolish to assume that there was no one awake in here. Caution was never unwise. Except in my case. Aster reached the door handle first, but I threw out my arm and stopped her. She shot me a glare, one of the ones that made it very clear what she wanted to say. Adyen, she would growl through her gritted teeth. I am perfectly capable of holding off any gang members who may be waiting in the next room. But it wasn't about ability. It was about going first so I could protect my sister if the unexpected happened. As her brother, I'd made that promise to myself when I was 7 years old, and it had driven every decision I'd made since. This was why I'd made that awful deal with Lars Alfred, the man who led the Dark Hearts, to protect Aster. It was because of that deal we were here now. Aster knew that, so she relented and let me go through first. The room was just as quiet as the rest and bare of furniture. Doors lined each wall, and I guessed that this was a nexus point. We could access the rest of the headquarters from this place. Luckily for us, we'd gotten info on the exact location of the Jewel of Ankred. I led Aster across the room to the third door on the right, and gently pushed on it. Sure enough, it was locked. With a sarcastic little bow, I stepped aside to let my sister do the honors. She knelt before the door and immediately set to work picking the lock. I stood watch. One hand slipped beneath the hem of my shirt to grip the pistol I picked up 3 years ago in a particularly shady part of Broton, and I never had enough ammunition for it. I restrained a snort. There wasn't a single part of Broton that wasn't shady, whether that was literally or figuratively. The place was a crime world built underground. Shady was its nature. The building remained quietly, and a moment later, Aster stood, indicating her work was done. I pushed on the door, and this time it yielded easily, swinging inward on oiled hinges. I had to hand it to the painted wolves. At least they kept up with their maintenance. Once we were both inside, I pulled the door closed, and I finally felt like I could take a deep breath. The door would muffle any sound, while still being thin enough to alert us to anyone approaching. Once we'd moved deeper between the rows of shelving that contained the kinds of treasures we sought, we finally felt like it was safe enough to whisper. "So what does this jewel of Ancred look like?" Aster demanded. "Is it a gem, a piece of jewelry, or what?" I winced. My sister was in a bad mood, but she always was when we went on these kinds of trips. "According to Lars, it's a large crystal ball made out of shards of the ancient city itself. It should be somewhere easily found. It looks magnificent when on display." Aster shook her head. "Of course you know that." I shrugged. "I did my research." She jabbed me in the shoulder. "Let's just find this thing and get out of here." With that, I heartily agreed. We split up, combing the shelves. I quickly found that they were filled with all manner of strange items. In the dimness, I could hardly identify any of them, but I found a lot of intricately carved daggers, beautiful and probably forged in Golkow, a city known for its craftsmen. But I left them, since Lars Alfred would just take them from me anyway. Esther would love those. I came around a corner and found the prize on a high shelf. The jewel of Ancred sat on an iron base, looking as spectacular as I'd imagined it. The lantern-sized crystal glowed softly blue in the dim lighting off an immaculate surface. Not wasting a moment, I stepped forward and picked it up, weighing it in my arms before slipping it into the bag I carried around my shoulders for exactly this purpose. "I found it," I said softly. "Let's go." I turned. Aster knelt on the floor before an open cupboard a row over, and she didn't respond right away. Finally, she said, "Adyen." "What is it?" I moved over to her. "Money," she whispered. "There's money in here." I knelt beside her. The cupboard was filled bottom to top with stacks of the paper certificates, papia, issued by the magnate to purchase things with. Each one could buy enough food for a single meal, but all of those stacked together. "So?" I asked. The glare Aster aimed at me was possibly more angry than the last. "So? There's enough here that will easily pay for Talia's passage, and there will still be thousands of notes left over for us. The painted wolves could stand to lose a few if this is anything to go by." "But anything we take out of here all goes back to Lars. You know that." "Then we just won't tell him." Aster gave a little toss of her head. "He'll find out," I warned. "He always does." "If and when he does, we'll be long gone," Aster said. "Think about it, Adyen. If we leave, we'll be free from that horrible man and his untrustworthy promises." I sat back on my heels, considering. Aster made a valid point. If we kept saving up the way we had been doing, papia by papia, it was going to take us years before any one of us could leave. That gave Lars Alfred plenty of chances to break his promises. And it was possible he wouldn't catch on until it was too late. Freedom. "Okay," I said. "We'll do it." I reached in and pulled out first one stack, then a second, and shoved them into the bag underneath the jewel. Hopefully, Lars wouldn't demand it searched. Aster grabbed a third stack and tucked it into the waistband of her skirt before pulling her loose shirt over it. The bump was barely noticeable. She grinned at me, her good spirits restored, and closed the cabinet door. We left, as silently as we had come. 15 minutes later, we stood within the bounds of the Darkheart's estate, as Lars liked to call it. I wouldn't call it that. Pure evil was a better term. 2 guards removed our blindfolds and escorted us through the doors and up to the steps where Lars's office was located. We had no idea where in the city we were. I was tense, one eye on the men that led us up. I didn't trust Lars Alfred not to go back on his word, and I knew what he wanted. For my dead body. The door to the office stood open as we approached, golden light spilling out of it. I knew the welcoming appearance was deceptive. I didn't even want to know half the things that must have taken place in that office. Unfortunately, I could also make some pretty good guesses. Lars was waiting for us when we came in, leaning back in his chair behind the wide desk that took up a decent portion of the room. The bald spot on top of his head shone slightly in the light from the lantern sitting on the top two corners of the desk. He was, of course, chewing on a cigar. "Did you get the item?" he grunted, looking up at the pair of us as we stopped before the desk. Aster smothered a cough. I forced a short laugh. "Of course not. In and out, easy peasy. Here you go, Sir Alfred Lack of Hair." With an extravagant gesture, I removed the jewel of Ancred from the bag and placed it on the desk before him. Lars Alfred glowered at my flippant attitude, but as soon as he laid his eyes on the jewel of Ancred, his frown smoothed out and his eyes widened with glee. Yes, this is it." He reached to touch the ball. "And you are certain it's the real thing? It's not a copy?" "Of course," I said, hoping that I wasn't lying. The ball had certainly felt like the real thing when I picked it up. Hopefully, our luck would hold. Good, Lars grunted. He called one of his guards over. "Get the jewel of Ancred placed in my gallery this moment," he ordered. "Yes, sir." The guard came forward, shifted the sphere into his arms, and carried it off. "So, we can go?" Aster asked once the man had gone. "Oh, yes, of course." Lars waved his hand noncommittally. "Out of my sight, the both of you." Almost there. We turned on our heels and moved to leave the Office of Doom. As soon as we were off the property, we would be free to go. Almost there. "Actually, hang on there for one moment," Lars's voice drawled out behind us. I sighed. Of course. Aster shot me a worried look as we turned back to face the crime boss. "Yes?" Lars Alfred pointed a fat finger at Aster, his expression twisted into a suspicious look. "You. What are you hiding?" "Nothing, sir." Aster lifted her chin in a defiant manner. I tensed. We were treading on very, very thin ice right now. One misstep and it was all over. Unfortunately, Aster wasn't always delicate. My hand started to creep back toward the handle of my pistol. "Don't lie to me." A dangerous edge slipped into Lars's voice. "What is that bulge in your dress?" He noticed that? My mind began to race, trying to figure out escape routes and ideas. Whatever happened, we had to get out of here. Aster had to get out of here. I would leave the money behind if necessary, but only if there were no other options. Aster still wore a calm exterior. "Like I said, nothing, sir." Lars got up from his seat. "Then I'm sure you wouldn't mind if I searched you." He started around the corner of the desk towards her. "Oh, no you don't, you slimy frog." I allowed my hand to slip around the pistol handle and prepared to defend my sister. Aster's hands landed on her twin knives, strapped on either side of her waist. "Actually, I mind very much." Lars's face darkened with anger, and Aster grabbed my arm, dragging me back towards the door. "Run!" she yelled. I tripped over my own feet and nearly fell before scrambling after her out of the office and down the stairs. Behind us, Lars Alfred sounded the alarm, and before long, the pounding footsteps of his goons reached my ears as they came to assemble from every corner of the building. There would be more outside, but my only thought was how quickly we needed to get away. Aster leapt the last few steps, landing on the ground before launching herself at the front door. I followed suit and we burst out into the dark. Shouts behind us. Shouts beside us. As we dashed for the front gates, I pulled the bag carrying the rest of the money over my head and tossed it to Aster. She caught it neatly and shot me a questioning look. "Go on," I shouted. "I'm right behind you." In this case, Aster had to go first. She had to get out no matter what happened. Predictably, she also didn't listen. "I'm staying with you," she shouted back. Someone's got to have your back. The gate loomed up in front of us. It was closed and latched, but not locked. Still, it would take a few seconds to get it open. Seconds I wasn't sure we could spare. We have to try. I have my own back, I said. I'll be okay. Aster groaned. I really hate this whole protecting me thing. I know. I wanted to give her a smile, but one just wouldn't come. I slammed into the bars of the gate, and my hand scrabbled for the latch, seeking for it to open. Hurry, Aster begged. I know that, just give me a second. My hand finally found the latch, and I yanked the slider back. The gate popped open, and I reached back for my sister. Aster darted through first, safely making it over the line into the city. I moved to follow, but a rough hand reached out and yanked me backwards. I fought to pull free, but there were more hands, grabbing, pulling, and all I could do was watch as I was pulled away from the gate. Gotcha, Lars hissed in my ear. Aster screamed. Adien! She threw the bag over her shoulder and reached for her knives. Hang on! No! Just run! Go! Get out of here! Please, leave me this time. Stay safe. She paused, anguish clouding her features. Her eyes were stretched wide in terror, hands frozen on the hilts of her blades. Adien, I won't. I can't. You'll have to, I called through the gate. Don't worry, I'll be all right. I'm sorry. A flash of silver glinted out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head in time to see the blade of a dagger come crashing down. And then there was only blood and pain and nothing.